Hey guys, Christopher here.
Hey guys, Noah here.
Don't mind me if I sound all excited. I'm really sick. I'm sick and I threw up my back.
Ooh.
The two events are not connected. They're two separate events and they both suck. I mean, I can
I'm not.
picture like sneezing and throwing up my back or something, but that's not what happened. They're not connected at all.
That's not what happened. I'm not really as bad off. I did somehow like fuck up my ankle, which is weird because like I really don't know what I did because I went to bed, I was fine, woke up, my ankle was not fine. So I don't know. We're just a mess here this week over Crooked Path Paranormal, but the show must go on. The show must go on. Um,
Indeed.
so today's topic is kind of just going to be going to be a little bit of a relaxed one today. We're going to be talking about this past weekend. We went to the Moundsville Penitentiary and we had an awesome time over with 111 Paranormal. I got to meet them for the very first time, and they were an awesome group of people. I would love nothing more than to go out and work with them again on some things. So it was a really awesome time. But the reason that we're kind of talking about it today rather than, later down the road is because we don't have enough footage um, and that's the way I want to word that. Is that we don't have enough footage to really make a sort of episode out of it. Particularly, I think there's going to be some things that we definitely include in sort of like a series that I make. I think that's what it's going to kind of be used towards. Is so there are things like people get to see some things that we did there, but it's going to be kind of like snippets from what happened that night. Um, Either because weirdly enough it sort of ties in a little bit to some things that we've been kind of talking about before, or it's definitely interesting things that happened and it needs to be out there and it needs to be seen, but it's not enough to really do a full on episode. So that's where we're kind of free to talk about it today. So that's what we're kind of going to be doing. Christopher, what did you think?
The energy there feels very different to me in the colder months. This is the first time I've been there when it's been cold.
Hmm.
Every other time I've been there, it's been summer or late summer.
Right.
I'm going to throw this out there. And maybe you can attest to this too. But you've now met my friend Patience.
Hmm.
She used to be a corrections officer,
Yeah.
and she said that she has this theory going into and investigating haunted jails. She feels like she discovers that there's more activity in these buildings in the winter months when it's colder. She feels like that's when there's more of a population in these buildings, or there were more of a population in these buildings because of people just trying to get off the street no matter what they had to do.
Right. I
I
could
kind
see
of had
that.
that in my head when I went there.
I can see that. I can see what she's saying. I definitely concur with that in a sense because one of the things that, well, the other thing too that I will say that like that I noticed a difference in between my first time being there and my second time, which the first time I was there was like in the middle of July. So definitely hotter months versus this past weekend where it was pretty cold out. I noticed this time there were a lot more unexplained noises going on, like bangs, sounds of people walking where there's nobody there. Like there was a lot of that. There was so much of that. It was
Yeah, there
really
was.
cool. And the only thing I'll say is the only reason I'm going to say I can't necessarily say that there was a ton more of that this time is only because the first time I was there and did an investigation, it wasn't a private like this one was. It was a public hunt where there was like 100 people throughout the prison. So with that, we ran into people all the time, and it was kind of like there were a lot of noises going on, but I couldn't really distinguish like was that somebody down the hall that's possibly moving around, or was I hearing noises? Um, I will say the difference though that I can say, and this is gonna sound maybe crazy, I don't know, but like while it's definitely an intense feeling being in there. I think the intenseness of the place was actually more intense during the summer months. And the only reason I say this is because, like, from my own experience of being a corrections officer, I've sort of noticed that when it's hot, people get irritated a lot more quickly when they're warm. And so that's where I feel like during the summer months, that's where I feel like they would be the spirits, if they're sort of reliving what it was like when they were there. They would be um, reflecting that in a sense. So that is the one thing I will say that I noticed a difference in, is like just how I felt in the environment. While there were times that I did feel sort of uneasy, but just in the general sense, I felt like it felt more chaotic during the summer month when I was there rather than the winter. But as far as actual just activity, I would concur with that. That there was more actual activity going on in the winter times than the summer.
I will say that when we've previously discussed this theory about there being more activity in the winter, I never considered that. We never went there about how the warmer temperatures affect people. So that's interesting. But I will say that I absolutely agree with you about there being more of an intensity in the summer. I 100% agree with that.
And that's just sort of how I think it actually is in real life, in the sense of it's what I notice at work. Like during the summer months, um, so like people get irritated much more quickly because they're hot. I don't know why that is per se, but that's just, it seems to be a trend. And I know there is some sort of scientific reason for it. I I don't know it, but I just, that's what I've noticed, is that people seem to get much more irritated much more quickly in the summer months when it's like blazing hot rather than in the winter.
I'm the opposite. I get much more irritated much more quickly when I'm cold because I hate to be cold.
That, I mean, that's like me too. Like I hate the cold, so I'm that sort of same way. I get much more irritated much more quickly in the cold because I hate it. But then it's also like the other thing that we have to throw in there, and the possibility is it because of the holiday season? You know, during the summer, it's not really the holiday season. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you have Fourth of July, but like that's not really anything compared to, like, Thanksgiving and then Christmas, that are like basically right back to back. You know, and literally the entire point of Thanksgiving and Christmas is, Thanksgiving is about being thankful for what you have and stuff like that, and then Christmas is about giving. And so I feel like that might also have a factor, in the sense of Thanksgiving and Christmas are typically the months in which I think people try to be a little bit more tolerant of other people, because like it's the spirit of Christmas, like, be thankful for what you have in Thanksgiving, and then kind of then that works really nicely over into Christmas, in the sense of be giving, in a sense. So I feel like that's something we have to take into effect as well, because I I fully believe, and as we've been kind of told, that like our emotions and our energy really affect the paranormal in a way that we don't really know how to explain. Like just
Right.
something about our aura, our energy, it it feeds them. So the energy that in which feeds off of these negative emotions, I don't know that they would be as powerful during the winter, because they're not getting fed as much. You know, it's kind of like almost like going into hibernation in a weird sense, sort of. But like the nicer spirits that are about those type of things, I feel like they'd be around a little bit more. So maybe their activity's going off a little bit more, and maybe that's why it feels so different, or feels so much more intense, because a lot of this activity that you're not really getting in the summer is now happening. So your brain is sort of linking that to, like, oh, it's just more active. It's like, is it more active, or is it just it's different? So you're noticing the difference.
Right.
I don't know. take that with a grain of salt, but I feel like we have to factor that sort of way into that.
One of the places that got my attention the most was the chapel. The first 2 times I was there, I absolutely loved the chapel. We had such great sessions in there. We had equipment going off like crazy. You could just feel the energy in there. And this time to me, it just felt like it was a void of energy.
I agree. Um, the only thing that I did last time I was there was we went in there. We had like one or two pieces of equipment out, and we didn't really get anything. Maybe the REM pod went off like one time, but we were just kind of sitting in the chapel, and I liked the vibe of the place, and we ended up doing like a little photo shoot and stuff. But yeah, it wasn't anything like too serious. No.
Right.
So I concur with that. So for me, I guess for me it was the same because the first time I was there, I didn't really have anything crazy happen, but yeah, it could have been different for. I see how it's different for you.
This time it really occurred to me just how big that place is, too. I mean, the first time I was there, I didn't experience a lot. My night was ruined by bats. The second time, we didn't have any problems with bats, and I thought I'd seen everything, but apparently I hadn't, because there were a number of times when we were just there that I looked around and went, what is this? I've never seen it before. So it really dawned on me just how massive that place is.
It is like think about the amount of hours that we spent, and we saw little to nothing, in my opinion. Like
Right.
we really did because like we went to the asylum part of the place or the infirmary, you can call it whatever. I From what I know about that place, it seemed much more like an insane asylum rather than an infirmary, but that's just from what I know of the place, and all the things that they sort of did to the inmates that were there. But with that being said, we saw that. We went to the kitchen area and the kitchen slash cafeteria area. Obviously, we went to the chapel. We went to the new block, which was the newer set of cell block that that was like the last thing that they built when they were there because as all places were back then, they were running out of space and they needed to be able to house more inmates. So they built new blocks. So we went there. Um, am I missing anything, or I think that was about it.
Yeah, I think that was it.
That was about it that we saw, and you'll sit there and think about that, and there really was a lot that we didn't see. Like we didn't even go to the Sugar Shack, which is like one of the most famous spots of that place, the Sugar Shack.
Right.
Um, and but the thing about Moundsville too, though, is that um, it really is such a cool place, and it's one that we'll be able to go to. I mean, whenever we may not be able to get a private just whenever we want, but it's close enough to me that I can go on a public hunt whenever. So
Right.
if there's anybody out there that wants to do a public hunt with us at the mountains, just hit us up and we'll probably show up.
Hell yeah, I'd love to get back there.
Right.
I'd like to
It's
spend a little more time in solitary too.
yeah, yeah.
That is where I gave up for the night the first time I went and my night was ruined by the bats. That's where I gave up. I was trying to do something down there and just I couldn't handle it anymore.
Right.
Now would be a good time of year to get back down there.
I probably yeah. That would be yeah. That's good. The thing I want to say too though that I noticed both times that I've been there. And again, I'm not saying that like this isn't a really prominent spirit because so many people have talked about him that I'm like, well, obviously he's got to be there then because a lot of people are reporting about him. But literally both times that I've been there, I haven't I haven't had a shed of evidence from coming from Red, which Red, if people don't know, is one of the more famous spirits to haunt the Moundsville Penitentiary, and he's in solitary. Because I do remember now, we spent like a little bit of time in solitary, a little bit. But when we were there, Red was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and it was this story where he essentially was killed by his best friend over like a little bit of an argument that they had. So, and he was like literally the only inmate to. So the other inmates, when he died, essentially all pitched in to buy his gravestone. That's like out at the cemetery and stuff. Which I guess that was like one of the only cases that had happened where like all the inmates like pitched in to have his memorial set up and stuff like that. So he's one of the more prominent spirits that is there, and they talk about how like if you bring stuff that he liked, like beef jerky and stuff like that, to the prison, to like he'll come talk to you and stuff like that. And both times I've not had anything. I've had nothing connected to Red at all. So again, I'm not saying that he's not there because I'm sure he is because so many people are talking about it. But for me personally, I'm like I haven't had either time Red come
Right.
up.
I haven't either. I know when some of the people we were with were trying to connect to him, we started to go down a different road, I thought. Somebody else was
We did.
starting to come through. We got a name and that never played out. So
It kind of yeah. It kind of came in, and I felt like we got about halfway through his story, and then it just sort of ended. And something that one of the tour guides that we had there mentioned that it made sense to me, possibly because whenever she asked us like, hey, did you guys have any, what kind of stuff did you get tonight, and we were just kind of blatantly honest with them, like we didn't really get a lot. We got a little bit, but we didn't get a lot. And again, I love that place, so I'm not trying to say like I was trying to not be like, oh man, this place sucked, like I didn't get anything. It's like, no, I love this place. It's just that like that's just how paranormal investigating is. There's times that you'll go and you'll get so much stuff, and then there's times where you won't get quite as much. We still got stuff, we still had stuff happen. It just
right.
wasn't a ton that we could really talk about, that we were like, oh yeah, we heard like a bunch of weird noises and stuff like that we couldn't explain, and we had a little bit of interaction, but there were times where, like I just said, we would get into a conversation with the spirit, and then it was like halfway through the conversation he just stopped responding and it wasn't there anymore. And she kind of said, well, it has been a while since we've done anything. Like, we haven't done any night tours in a while and stuff like that. So like maybe it's like they're lacking energy, and it's like that very possibly could be, because kind of like what I said a few minutes ago, they feed off of our energy. So if they don't have us around, sorry, my phone just went off and I didn't realize I didn't put it on silent. Um, but if they don't have us around to sort of feed off of our energy, I feel like they would be lacking in energy and wouldn't be able to do as much. So that
Right.
was sort of an explanation for me in a sense.
When she was first asking us what we got, of course, my mind is thinking of the one thing we did get that isn't really connected there. I know we'll put it out there later.
Yeah.
I just remember kind of standing there and looking at her like, how the fuck do I even tell her about that? Because it was just
Right.
so bizarre and so unexpected. Don't worry, we'll put this out there later. You'll know.
Yeah.
But
And that's one of the things too that like I'm split on, because that's the thing that I've sort of come to realize about the paranormal too, is that I think before I used to look at it as very much just whenever you go to a location, the only communication that you're going to have is with who's ever there. And that doesn't seem to be the case, because a lot of the paranormal spirits that we've come into communication with, they talk about these doors. We call them portals, but they just call them doors. And they're able to move in and out of them. And so that's where it's like, whenever you have people like us that are so involved with the paranormal, these spirits tend to know who you are, obviously. So, and weirdly enough, I don't know how this works, but sometimes they seem to know where you're going to be. I don't know if it's just because they hear you talking about it, so they're like, oh, okay, he's going to be there. Like, okay, so I'll remember that, and when they're there, I'll go visit them, sort of thing. And so that's where it's kind of like whenever she asked that, and we had somebody come in from another place, and even when I asked like, hey, are you from this place, just to confirm, they said, no, I'm not, I just came here. And I was like, okay, cool, that makes sense. in a way. It's like, yeah, I don't even really want to harp on that because it's like that had nothing to do with here. And I was trying to mainly tell her about what was here, what was like your spirit.
Right.
And it's like sometimes it actually gets annoying. Sometimes, whenever you try to go to a location and you really just want to spend time with those spirits, and then you have people coming from these other locations and they're like, "Hey, I'm here to talk to you again." It's like, can you come at another time? I'm trying to give them their space, sort of thing. But yeah, that happened, and then it was kind of like I didn't really want to harp too much on it because it had nothing to do with that location, and I was trying to really be in the presence of those spirits.
I mean, when we were at Hinsdale, we did kind of set an intention that we really wanted to talk to those who were there. And I think it mostly worked.
I think it did. I think it totally did, and maybe that's what it is too. Because I think a lot of times when we go into a place, we're not really we're sort of vague in a sense of like we're just saying, hey, like I will just want to reach out whoever has a message, and sometimes that brings in people that have a message for us, but they're not from that place. So maybe that is something that we need to keep in mind in a sense of like whenever we're just trying to be in that location and talk about that location and I don't really want to deal with this other stuff that I know is important. I know I have to get to it, but like telling me this stuff that I already know is like I don't need this. You know what I mean? So I'm actually thinking not this weekend, but next weekend whenever we go to Prospect Place with patients. I feel like maybe we should put an intent out there that that's just who we want to communicate with.
100%. I've never been there and I want to dive into that place so badly.
Right, right. Because the first time I was there, I I didn't get to really spend much time with the actual place itself because back then that was before we ever really investigated together or anything like that, and um I just remember that was where um the whole Ed storyline started, which that will I'll have to tell in more detail how that actually came to be because obviously everybody knows at this point my hatred for Ed. But that's where it kind of started was was there, and not in the sense of like Ed's not from there. Ed's from the Belair house, obviously, but we had previously went to the Belair house, and then that was like the next place that we had went, and all of a sudden, we realized that Ed had attached himself to my best friend Gage, and that's it. Kind of started down this rabbit hole, and I was like, oh no, but yeah, so I didn't really get to experience the place all that much either.
The next time we have someone come through that's not actually connected to a place, I want to actually ask that question. Like, how the hell did you know we were here?
Right? I never think to ask that question. I kind of get so involved with whatever's going on. I'm trying to intake the information that's
Oh,
given.
I get
I
it.
don't think to ask that question like, "Hey, how did you know that I was going to be here today?"
Right. I can think of a number of instances where that would have been a great question and just,
For sure. I 1000% agree with that. So I agree. Next time that this happens, we definitely need to ask that question.
sometimes it's just so shocking. Like, I mean, obviously I don't remember it. You had to tell me about it afterward, but like who came through at Gill House?
Yeah.
I mean, if I were sitting on the other end of that where you were, I can see myself like not knowing what to say. Just really?
Yeah. She
Any
did.
questions I might have asked would go right out the window.
She did. She came through, and there was a moment where I was like, "What?" And then I was like, I got to continue asking questions. So then I just continued on and got to the bottom of why she was there. But I was like, what? You don't have anything to do with this place. Why are you here?
Yeah, that's the
How'd you
question
even
we'll
know to
have to
come
pull out
here?
there.
Like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
It
definitely
was
want to
very
hang
weird.
on to that and start exploring that. How'd you know? How'd you know we were here?
Right. It was weird. It's very weird.
I feel like me, it's always the answer is always like probably Rena from room 315 at Fairfield County Infirmary. She probably just lets everybody goes to ask her where I'm going. It's like, oh, he's here today. She's probably got a copy of my schedule and my calendar, and she just directs everybody.
Maybe, I don't know.
Oh God, I can't laugh. I'll start coughing.
And then your back will get even more thrown out.
Oh God, don't even say that. Oh shit. Yeah, let's not go there. So one thing I want to bring up about this last trip to Moundsville,
Yeah.
what the guide was saying when we first got there.
What was
So
she saying?
this was my first time ever going up to the 4th level of the cell block. I'd never been up there.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I've been there, the bats were so bad. I'm like, no, I'm not going up. That's the last place I need to go. I want to stay on the ground.
Right.
She was telling Laura and Laura from 111 is very psychic as well. She was telling us that there was a group there not terribly long ago. One of the guys, more or less a skeptic, nothing psychic about him, had gotten up to that level in the cell block and got to a point where he just felt like he couldn't move. He felt like his leg was locked into place. He could not move. He felt paralyzed. And it was very close to a spot where someone had fallen over to their death down below at the showers. And she was...
He didn't fall. That instance that you're talking about, that dude didn't fall.
I don't know the story.
He got thrown over.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know the story.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what spot you're talking about. That dude didn't fall. He got thrown over to his death.
But the guide was telling us to go to that spot and see if we could feel the same thing that guy felt. Mm-hmm. And she kept telling us, don't go alone, don't go alone. And of course, that makes my mind go, I want to go alone.
Right. Right.
But neither Laura nor myself felt that at all up there.
See, and that's something that I guess it kind of sparks my mind with too, that I really wonder about, because I feel like when it comes to like the physical part of stuff, I haven't had a lot of experiences with that. Like I've had little stuff happen. Like like I talked about the first time I was there, I felt somebody kind of tickle the back of my neck and stuff. And I remember coming up that people will see at the Ross house, like where like my arm essentially got grabbed and it scared the shit out of me. And I've had stuff like that, but I've never had anything like that happen. And it's like this isn't me saying I don't believe in it. It's just more of I believe that other people are experiencing this, and I'm more questioning why haven't I? Or I know you're kind of saying like where you haven't had a lot of that side of things happen, and it's kind of like, why is that? You know, what's the reasoning behind it? And the only thing that comes to mind possibly, and I don't really understand it, but it's this idea of like, you know, people, obviously we talk about energy a lot, and we've been sort of told that everybody has different layer or levels of energy. And I'm maybe thinking that like if you're somebody that's like a very high energy like level, if you have a lot of energy, maybe it's kind of like a protective barrier in a sense where it's a lot harder to affect you in that way, where if you're somebody that doesn't have as much energy around you, that's where you're more susceptible to those things happening. I don't know. I'm just trying to make it make sense, but
right.
It's the only thing I can think of at the moment.
I kind of left there feeling like Laura and I didn't feel it well. I mean, maybe there was nothing there to feel in that moment.
Right.
But I sort of felt like we didn't feel it because we were looking for it.
There's that too. I feel like that's true too. Like sometimes the harder you look for something, you'll never find it. But it just seems to, when you're not looking for it is when it shows up.
Right. Had one of us just wandered up there not knowing, maybe it would have happened.
And I think that too is why I think it's so important when you're paranormal investigating to go into a place and not put any sort of intention into it. Other than like what we were just talking about, like I just want to talk to who's here. I think that's vague enough that it's okay. But
Right.
I'm saying like if you go into a place and you know the history, like say going to Moundsville and you're like, I want to go talk to Red. So you specifically are looking for Red, you're specifically trying to connect with him. I feel like that's where you're probably not going to get him. Which we didn't go to talk to Red. That's where 111 went. They went like that during that uh, part of Solitary. We were kind of like just a little bit down the hallway there. And we ended up getting something else. But I think that's why it's important to do that, because just sort of sit there in the space and let whatever's going to come. Because like if I feel like you're right, if you essentially put the intention to like looking for it, you're not really going to experience it as much.
Right. I feel like even when we do our reading at the beginning of an episode, I feel like we do a pretty good job of not putting too much intention or expectation into it. Now, I'll admit every now and then before I start turning cards, I'll say out loud, these are the things I've got in my mind going into
Right.
this. These are the things
Right.
that I'm holding on to as unfinished business here. If
Right.
those things are going to come up, they'll come up.
Right.
But more often than not, we just turn the cards. What comes, comes. Every now and then, if we're in a place for a specific purpose, this is what we're doing, this is what has to be done,
Right.
I'll state an intention before I turn a card because we know what we're doing already.
Right.
I just need insight into how we're going to go about it or how we're going to get there.
Oh, exactly. You're 1,000% right. And not only in that, but you can also sort of segue into why that's also important of not putting too much intention behind like um equipment, because we kind of talked about this before, and it's like kind of like forcing a narrative in a sense, because I feel like if you're trying to go in with a sort of mindset of like this is who I want to talk to, you're sort of forcing a narrative in that sense, and everybody does this. Everybody does this. Everybody is human, and we all like to have things kind of go our way, obviously. So we go in and we're kind of like, hey, I want this to happen, or something might come up in a spirit box or even a piece of equipment, and you're like, oh, I think it relates to this, because what you're going off of is what your own personal experiences are. So you'll have something happen and you're like, oh, I think this is related to my thing, and it's like it might not be. So keep that sort of open mind in the sense of it might not be connected to what you're saying. It just might be a coincidence that it's similar, similar wording, similar phrasing, something like that. And that's where it's kind of like, I think the biggest part of this is like, or the easiest I think to succumb to is like, say you have a piece of equipment that's like a REM pod, right? And a REM pod picks up on electromagnetic frequencies and the disturbance of them and stuff. And so if I've got a REM pod sitting there and I'm asking questions like, hey, is so and so, is it, like, for instance, like, is Red here? And it goes off. And I'm like, oh, okay, that was a yes. I don't know that. You know what I mean? There's so many different possibilities. Like, that could have been Red stepping into the cell, so it went off. There could be some sort of weird, like, if you're in a place that has bad wiring, that might have set it off. There might be a delay in what's going on. I might ask 10 questions and thinking that it's answering each question in real time, but actually it's answering questions for like 3 questions ago. There might be a little bit of a delay there. And so that's where it's kind of like, keep that sort of in mind. Like, I think it's cool when that stuff happens. Like, whenever you ask a question and a REM pod goes off, it's just that I wouldn't take that as like solid proof. You know what I mean? Now, I
Yeah,
think there's
that,
things you can do. I think there's things you can do, but
that was a great point about the delay. That was a really good point.
well, because we're not quite sure, and
Right.
especially because like I think each different equipment and how they work might affect the paranormal differently. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, like whenever you do an Estes method, and it does seem to be a lot more like I ask a question and then I get a response, which sometimes you can even tell there's a delay.
Right.
Because you might ask a question and the person under the headset, it might be 10, 15 seconds later and they respond. You know what I mean? So there
Right.
might be some sort of delay that you kind of have to keep in mind with that sort of stuff. And it's like I'm not saying this to sort of like discourage anybody from using those pieces of equipment. Obviously, we don't use them a lot. I do want to start using them a little bit more just for like other purposes because I think it is cool when they go off. It is like, and a lot of
Yeah.
times it is unexplainable. So that's not me saying that at all. It's just that um, take everything, take everything in the paranormal with a grain of salt. You know, I can't look at one piece of evidence and be like, oh, that's the answer. It's kind of like you have to take all these different things and compile them together and notice the patterns. You know, was this did this basically correlate with this? You know, did they say the
Right.
same thing? And did they say it multiple times? Did they say the same thing? The hardest one for me to sort of disprove is the Estes method, only because I know from experience when you go under the headset and when you are blindfolded, you can't see the person, you cannot hear the person at all. So, if the person under the headset is directly answering a question in which the speaker is asking, I don't know how to explain that. So that is the one that is the hardest for me to sort of like obviously I take that one very seriously, but it's because it's so hard to disprove. I mean, I understand sitting behind a TV screen when you're watching somebody else do it, you're kind of like sitting there like, I think they could probably hear them, something like that. But like, if you do it in the real world, like if you go out and do it yourself, which all you need is a little spirit box and a headset and a blindfold. Go out and do it. You will see how you can't hear, you can't see. So whenever you have stuff come through that you're like, oh my god, that's cool. That's cool. I don't know how to
Right.
disprove that
While we're talking about getting different answers from different pieces of equipment, I'm going to get on my soapbox here
one.
about asking yes and no questions with rods and how
Yeah.
important it is to be specific in your questions. And I know I've told you this story
Yeah.
a while back. I was a special guest for a Paracon, and we were investigating, myself and the person who organized the event.
Mhm.
And what we were digging into using the rods, communicating yes or no with someone, somehow related to an object in the building that went missing and the consequences of that happening.
Mhm.
And one of the questions the other person asked was, do you know if the object is still here? We got a yes. And their next question was, where is it? And I was like, wait a minute. They didn't say it was here. The way I interpreted your question, do you know if it's still here? I interpreted that yes as, yes, I know whether or not it's still here.
Right. Right.
So
That
I
wasn't
took it.
answering that it was here.
So I got them to back up a little bit and reword, and then we were able to follow that. I hope it was a lesson for the 30 some people that were watching this session.
You're very right though, and that's like that is true. You have to be very specific in your wording and be aware of what you're asking because if you're not, you might end up getting false information or misinterpret something. And the thing I like too, like kind of I like the rods in that sense because you know you get very direct yes and no questions. One of the pieces of equipment that I have that's a technical piece of equipment that I use a lot is the Envoy box. But with that being said, I like the Envoy box as sort of like double confirmation because even using the Envoy box, I'm a little bit more aware in the sense of I've asked questions and immediately gotten like say a yes, and I'm like, oh okay, yes, and then immediately afterwards it'll go no. And I'm like, okay, now I don't know what to do because I got yes and I got no. Which one was
Right.
the answer? Because again, those pieces of equipment work off of electromagnetic fields. And the thing that we have to understand is there are literally electromagnetic fields everywhere. You can't see them, but they're everywhere. You know, in the wiring in our walls, in the pieces of equipment, like phones give off electromagnetic, fields, so any sort of fluctuation in electromagnetic fields can cause that device to go off. So you have to be aware of that in the sense of notice the patterns. Don't go off just the first thing that's said. That's where a lot of times you'll see me like, all right, just for double confirmation, if that was a yes, make it go yes. If it was a no, make it go no. And then it's like when it goes either one, I'm kind of like, all right, I think it's this based off of double confirmation, but I still have to keep in the back of my mind that who knows? Who knows? So that's where I think using multiple pieces of equipment is actually what's more beneficial because, again, you're not going off of one piece of equipment. You're going off of multiple pieces of equipment and noticing if any of them correlate.
Right.
Where's the pattern at? Notice the pattern.
I love the idea of using multiple pieces of equipment to verify. I mean, I've got a friend, whenever I do a board session, she always uses a pendulum to sense a shift in energy, and she'll tell me something's shifting here. And that usually means somebody's on their way out, somebody's on their way in.
Right.
And had she not mentioned it, I might not immediately notice the transition. I might just
Right.
continue asking questions.
Right. Right. I fully agree with that.
Well, it's really interesting to see how the different pieces of equipment fit together in that sense.
Yeah. And then it's also cool too, like obviously when we first met, we were coming at the paranormal in two totally different atmospheres. You were much more with the mystical side of paranormal investigating, and I was much more on the technical. All I did was technical and stuff like that. And it's been really cool to when we first started investigating together, how it sort of meshed together. Like you would use your stuff and I would use my stuff, and how it sort of correlated together. But now it's really cool in the sense of the way in which we do things now is so different compared to I think a lot of people, that we've sort of blended the two together, and it's really cool. It's
It is
really,
really cool.
and that's where like now when I talk to people, it's like, hey, just give it a try. Even if you're not real big on it right now, I'm not saying, hey, just go in and believe everything, but just go try it, see what you get, see what happens. Just be open to it.
Absolutely.
Because
I
I know
mean,
there were definitely some things that when I started, I was a little bit skeptical about. And I think you always need to have a layer of skepticism. Don't just go into everything believing in everything. But I was definitely a lot more skeptical than I am now. There's a lot more that I believe in now than I did when I very first started.
just imagine the first time you worked with me if you weren't open at all. Imagine how that would have gone.
I know. But with that being said, which that'll be a story in itself. But those things, there was no there was no getting around it. I feel like that experience was just, I guess I'll talk about it a little bit. And this is where this is what blew my mind. This is when I really started to become a believer. And it was where, obviously, with what I was doing with Belmont Paranormal Society, with Gage, we still use the Estes method more than I think anything else that we did. We still use the Estes method a lot. And it's because I was so fascinated with it. But whenever we met you and we're talking about your psychic abilities, and I was really trying to understand what they were and stuff like that. We were kind of like, hey, let's do an experiment if you don't mind. And you're like, yeah, what is it? And I was like, so what I want to do is I kind of want to do a double Estes method in a sense. But I was like, what I want to do is I want to have Gage go under the headset like we always do, and we'll do an Estes method, right? But what I want you to do is I'm going to have you sit right next to me, and I'm going to give you a notepad and a pen, and I'm going to ask questions as I normally do. And if you hear something, don't say it, nothing. Just write it down. Whatever you hear, just write it on the paper. And what blew my mind is as I'm sitting there and I'm asking questions, and I did it because obviously I didn't know you at that point in time, and I'm trying to figure out like, hey, like is this guy real or whatever. So it's like why I wanted you to sit next to me so I could sort of watch this thing transpire. And so I'm watching you write things down, and then maybe a 5 second delay, maybe not even 5 seconds. Gage would say what you wrote down under the headset. And I remember sitting in that basement. I'm like, holy shit, this is actually happening. Like, this is cool. And we got done with that session, and it blew my mind so much that I was like, yeah, there's no way. There is no way that I'm asking the questions, and they weren't predetermined questions. And that was part of the major point of this, was that I had all the questions in my head. I didn't say them to nobody. It was just, we're going to do a session. I ask questions. You're writing them down, and then like literally right after you're writing them, he's saying it under the headset. I'm like, I know he can't hear or see. I know I didn't say nothing to you, so you two are correlating. Neither one of you should know what the answers are. Nothing. It was cool, and that was the moment that I was like, I'm a believer. I'm a believer. Like, and I'm gonna see where this goes, and it has really blown up. So it is cool to think about like where it started and where we're at now.
Right.
It is cool. It is very cool.
Right. I mean, things happened those 2 nights when we were at the Ross house that going in, I thought to myself, no, that's off the table. That's not going to happen. Like, I'm not going to do any channeling work while I'm here. I don't think they're ready for that. And then look what happened.
Right. And it was so funny too, because like this was after Prospect Place, and we had kind of just like figured out that he had an attachment to Ed and this whole Blair House story that was going and stuff like that. It was funny because you're sitting there from your point of view, like, I don't think these guys are ready for this. And then we were sitting there like, I don't know if he's ready for tonight, like with us. Like, it was funny. I was different perspectives of it. I think the thing for me though, not in that moment obviously, but looking back at that moment, like whenever we first kind of like decided to do Crooked Path, whenever I messaged you the original time, I think the thing that got me more was I knew why I was contacting you. You know what I mean? Like, the experience that I had with you like kind of blew my mind in such a sense that I was like, I need to investigate with this guy more. You know, I think we would really work as a group here. I was more like, I don't know what it was about me that made you want to join up with me, because the amount of people that you know in the paranormal, when I was originally sending that message, I was like, he's probably not even going to answer me, and I couldn't blame him because like, you know, we don't know each other all that well. Um, we had some good stuff that happened, but I guess I was more like, out of all the people that he knows, all the people that he's investigated with, I was like, what are the chances that he's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm willing to create a paranormal investigation group with you. So that was one of the things that I look back at. I was like, what was it about me? I guess in that sort of sense.
It's funny that you say that about me not answering the message, because I'm very well known for not answering messages.
At that point in time, there was a message that I had sent you that you didn't respond to, and that was part of it too. Because I had sent messages on normal text messaging, which I knew at that point that like you had said a few times that like you're really bad at answering messages. So I was kind of like, man, I really feel like I need an answer to this. So I was kind of like, also another point, another thought that went into my head was like, I don't like the text messaging because I have an iPhone and you don't, so I can't see when you read the text message. I can't tell if you ever read it. I was kind of like, I need something to tell me if he's actually reading my messages or not. So I sent it on Messenger because I was like, I know it's going to tell me whether he opened it or not. So I'm not going to lie, that factored into my decision making on that too, because I really just wanted to know. I was like, because at least on my point, I was like, I wasn't going to be mad either way. I was just kind of like, either I need to stop bothering this dude because he's reading my stuff and just not responding. So therefore, obviously, it's like, all right, he wants nothing to do with me. That's cool. Whatever. It is what it is. But that was where I was like, I'm going to send it on Messenger. And then it was like, I don't even think it was 5 minutes later you responded. I was like, holy shit. It caught me so off guard.
And I mean, to answer your question, when you said, yeah, there's all these different roads I could have gone, different people I could have worked with, why did I say yes? It
Yeah.
was just an instant gut reaction. There was nothing to think about. It was an instant gut reaction. Absolutely.
Mhm.
There was nothing to think about.
It's like looking back at it now from where we're at and what we've been told and stuff, it makes much more sense.
Clearly, my spirit guide would have kicked my ass if I would have said no.
Yeah, you just done like face palm thing, like
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Looking back now, it makes sense why, but yeah, it was one of those things like you get back into the sort of like talks about synchronicities and stuff like that. Like why do they happen in which the way that they do, and it's kind of like these moments that are sort of very big life decisions. Like everything always seems to work out the way it's supposed to, which is always weird.
Right.
Even if you don't know what it is in the moment, or like you're disappointed by whatever happened, something ends up happening later that you're at where you're supposed to be at, and you'll look back and you'll be like, oh, well that did sort of work out, and it's funny to me that that worked out in the way that it did, and now it makes sense. But yeah, back then I was just kind of thinking of like what was it that made made you? But that makes sense. That makes sense.
Based on the direction things are going and what's been coming through, I feel like had I said no, my spirit guide would have kept sending me bats until I said yes.
I don't even know. Like, I feel like maybe even if you would have said no in that point in time, you might have just gotten either one of two things, or maybe both. It might have just been like you might have just randomly seen like my Facebook page pop up, something like just weird stuff. You know what I mean? That wouldn't have made sense. Like stuff popping up here and there. We might have ran into each other at random times again, like kind of how we met and stuff like that. Like I think
Right.
we would have just like had random stuff happen enough to a point where we're kind of like, all right, this is weird. This is weird that it's happening as much as it is,
Right.
which is kind of what it was to begin with, because you know both times that it was kind of like, the first time we met, obviously you weren't even really supposed to be the tour guide that time, and we met you there. And
Right.
then there was the whole, we're going to the Ross house, and I was sitting on my couch, and I was just like, oh man, it was like a week out too. It was like really close to when we were going, and I was kind of like, oh shit, like he's the one that mentioned this place to us. It'd be awesome to do something with him. So I reached out, and you just happened to have that weekend open that you could come investigate with us. Just stuff like that. It was very very strange. Even at that point in time, I was kind of like, there's a lot of weird coincidences that are happening. That just everything is lining up way too easily.
Right. Right. I'm still saying my spirit guide would have sent bats
Very possible. Very 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 possible.
by the
Very very
thousand.
possible. Very very possible. And then it's kind of, I have to look at it too. Is like, if that would have happened, would I have never gotten my spirit guide? You know.
Right.
That's, you know what I mean? I have to ask that question in the sense of, if we would have never met in the way we did, and obviously my spirit guide started to become a little bit a part of my life before we officially made Crooked Path, but my point is, it still did happen after we had met and done some like an investigation together.
Right.
So like I had to ask that question, like if that stuff would have never happened, would I have ever connected with my spirit guide?
Wow. That just gives me chills.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I mean, the main guide I work with, it was all because I won a night at a location.
Right.
I bought like one ticket and threw it in because I had a question about a bedroom that they had a picture of. And then next thing you know, I won.
Right.
And I came home with a new spirit guide and a million questions.
I understand that. I understand that full-heartedly. As all things, we kind of like got really sidetracked from talking about Moundsville, but I think it was a good conversation. But
I agree. That was fun.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, but we got really sidetracked from Moundsville, which I mean, like that really honestly was all that we could really talk about. I mean, like we had a really great experience with 111, and really most of the night was I was testing out some new equipment. We had just purchased the brand new GoPro Hero 13 Ultra Wide Edition, and which I'm really excited to use more and more as we go. So I was just sort of testing out the GoPro and how I liked it, and getting some ideas of how I want to use it for the future and stuff like that. And we had some really cool new DJI Mic 2s that are really, really nice, especially because they're going to be so much better audio quality than what the old mics were giving us. So I got to test them out a good bit. So it was a good night in that sense. Like we got to meet I got to meet some really great people. Can't wait to possibly do something with them again. Got to test out some new equipment, and we had a good time. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was a great
It really
night.
wasn't as much to really talk about with it. It was just a good night overall.
It was for sure. I'd go back there again in a second, but you
Oh,
know
I
that.
would too. I love that place. That place will always hold a spot in my heart. Just all the history that it has, all the just my own history there. Just it being symbolic in the sense of is my very first location that I ever investigated. So it'll always hold a special place in my heart.
Oh, absolutely. It's because of that place that I wear the beekeeper hat.
You didn't have to this time though.
No, I didn't even bring it in. No, it is because of that place that I wear it. I mean, I had such a bad shit attack because of the bats there. I lost my mind. It ruined my night. I went and sat in base camp and cried. And then at the end of the night, I was like, fuck it. I have to come back here because this is a really cool place. How am I going to do that? And then the light bulb went on. Beekeeper hat. So the first time I ever wore it was there. And I've never seen a bat while wearing the hat ever. I just saw I think I showed it to you, but I'm going to throw it out there for everybody else. I just saw an epic tattoo design. It was a
Oh,
ghost wearing a beekeeper hat, and there were bees flying around it. I
yeah,
am going to get that, but it's going to be bats flying around
that
instead.
is good. That is good. That tattoo was practically made for you
Hell
specifically.
yeah. if there's a way if there's a way they can get the beekeeper hat tilted sideways slightly, that would be even better. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. But as always, this was a fun one to do. I love this conversation as always. If anybody has any sort of questions, comments, let us know in the comment section. It was a good time to talk about our experience this past weekend with 111 Paranormal. Go give them a follow. Go shout out. They're really great people. I really like what they're doing over there. So go give them a follow.
The whole team is great people.
Yes, they are. They were awesome. All right.
All
Well,
right.
till next time, guys.
See you later.
See ya.